a lot of times we feel so much threat by a group of people or by a cause or by a force that we don't necessarily understand the full picture of. So when you talk about taking this model and copy and pasting it onto other conflicts that we have, I really see so much beautiful opportunity. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another conversation here at Community Matters Cafe. I am your host, Janet Angel, and that's right, Coffee and Conversations kicking off once again to talk about how I am meeting people that are brewing a big and bold and beautiful life. And we're all going to do it together, continuing to take risks, to open up our minds, to open up conversations, and just to be bigger and bolder in our own lives. So we've had an array of guests. We've talked to artists, we've talked to entrepreneurs, and today we are talking to one amazing, wow-worthy woman who is taking tiger conservation into her own hands. I am very honored to introduce you to Hrishita Negi, and she is the Associate Director of Tigers United at Clemson University. Hrishita, thank you for coming all the way from Clemson University here to Community Matters Cafe in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm so happy you're here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great. Thank you.
So obviously we're talking about tigers and humanity, and there's a lot of things that go into what you do. And I'm sure everybody is excited to talk about tigers, but this specific love of protecting a species, but also making sure that that species could live in harmony with the humans that surround it, started at a very young age for you. So before we talk about what you're doing now and combining technology and humanity together, can you walk us back to young Hrishita, literally living amongst tigers with her family, and paint that picture for me?
Of course, yeah. So I almost grew up in central India landscape, and this is really interesting because it's one of the global priority tiger landscapes. It has, I think, around approximately 40% of India's tiger population alone. And my father was the director of one of the tiger reserves. And so, you know, all my formative years were just sort of spent watching tigers in the wild. We used to be on elephants sometimes and monitoring tigers. So it was a pretty special, growing up years.
I mean, so you just kicked butt on show and tell day when you went to school and everyone else had to talk about what they did this weekend, and you were like, well, here's what I did. Good job.
That's right.
Good job superseding that. So growing up in that environment, my understanding from just the interviews and the stories that I've heard about you is that you saw two very distinctive groups of people: Mother Nature trying to exist as it was meant to and created to, but then also an increasing human population. And you found that there was a little bit of conflict there. Can you talk to me about how you started to see that from a young age?
Absolutely. So, you know, in India, we have done tremendously well with protecting these species. It's sort of something which is very unique on its own because it's one of the biggest global conservation success stories. What started initially with the inception of Project Tiger, which was sort of like a blueprint for what the tiger conservation program for the country looked like. That started in 1973 with around 9 tiger reserves. And today the country has over 55 tiger reserves. And we've done tremendously well to, you know, as you can imagine, increase the tigers and the range of tigers across the country. But at the same time, we almost call it, managing the success of the tiger conservation story in India, because as you rightly pointed it out, it's also a country of 1.4 billion people. And that's a country averaging over 400 people per square kilometers. Now, these communities, you know, especially the ones that live in these tiger landscapes, are so dependent on forest resources themselves. It's almost a common theme in developing countries because they are so heavily dependent on land and livestock. And so you can imagine now with tiger population increasing in the tiger reserves, what we've found in the recent years is that now there is permanent residence of these tigers around these human communities. So as you can imagine, there is a huge resource crunch where, you know, both sides are just trying to survive and just trying to thrive in the same area. So that's, you know, a recipe for conflict also at the same time.
Yeah, and something that you talk about a lot in your work is taking that conflict head on, but with a grace and humanity about it, and understanding that there are these villages, especially on this tiger superhighway, as you call it, where tigers are going from different parts of the area to either find mate or resources.
100%.
But there's all these villages that are in kind of the crossfire of these tigers. And what's happening, just to give everyone a snapshot here, is that a lot of these villages are losing cattle, they're losing goats, they're losing their livelihood to these tigers. So for us, it's very easy to see these beautifully produced commercials. We want to save the tigers. We want to buy the plush toy. We want to do whatever. But then to go to somebody whose livelihood is being taken away by an animal that we see as beautiful.
Absolutely.
How have you found that you can have that conversation with these communities and with these villages?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question because, like you rightly pointed out, these communities face immense emotional and economic damages, right? They lose their livestock. I mean, we have over 100 livestock that they lose in this very tiger corridor we're talking about each year. And now we have growing concerns on human injury as well. So imagine losing your family member to tiger. That, of course, I mean, these are serious threats. And at the same time, the tigers, you have to look at it from their perspective too, because these communities, sometimes rightfully so, when they're angry, they do what we call retaliatory killings as well. So the tigers face those threats, who live in these shared spaces. But at the same time, what we've also recently learned is that tigers and a lot of, in fact, large predators, they form networks of reverence, veneration, reciprocity, and, even kinship in many of the indigenous communities who see them as something beyond just the large predator. The way they conceptualize tiger is in fact sometimes radically divergent than how our academic understanding of that is. And so for a lot of those communities, my own research, in fact, in this very tiger corridor, I studied 2 notable Central India tribes, and we looked around how they position tigers basically in their knowledge and belief systems and their worldviews. And we realized that tigers are revered in these communities. And they want the tigers around because literally their cultural practices, traditions, and myths, everything revolves around the tiger being there because they almost co-evolved in step with the tiger and the local ecology. So it's really interesting. The one first thing I think when you have those conversations with them is to remember the cultural specificities and to also recognize that, interactions, you can have distinct interplays of human-wildlife interactions, right? And so just be respectful to it and sort of, and learn from them because, and so what we really work towards is trying to make this attempt of finding conservation strategies together make more inclusive and in fact for us to be well informed.
I think, like you said, making sure that you're not only just informed, but also empathetic, because if you were talking to someone from one community who might really revere the tiger species, but then you go to another community where someone's lost a loved one, trying to defend their own livelihood, those are going to be 2 very different sets of emotions that you're working with.
100%. And, we've had, my own research, we had a huge social dimension component to it, and we interviewed very many people across the zone corridor, and it's sometimes really hard to sit across these, especially women, because it's not just about family. Even the livestock, they rear it like their own family member, right? So losing that is a huge economic dent, but also emotional attachment to the species as well. So there is a lot sometimes, but the idea is that we want to sit together. In fact, that's one of the things we do is we hold a lot of workshops because one of the things you really want to do is spread awareness, and you want to sensitize these conflict-ridden groups. So we have, very many targeted educational material where the idea is to also sit down with the communities and talk about, well, why are tigers here? Why have they, in the recent very many years, seen an insurgence, in the tiger numbers? So that helps us to explain those things to them, and they are very receptive, and they know a lot about that area, more so than we do, in fact, in many different contexts. And so it becomes a really great conversation to sit together, and then, I'm sure you know about it, then we have technological solutions and things like that. So the idea is to co-develop solutions.
Yeah, I think that's incredible, and I do want to dive into the technology, but first you mentioned something that sparked in me, and you said, especially as a woman, like you were a female from a high-level research facility going back to the place where you called home and getting to talk to other people. But now, how do you feel received as somebody who is a subject matter expert here? Do you feel like it's respected and well received when you go and you have these conversations?
Absolutely. I think, my entire experience, especially with my own research, because it was so immersive, spending tremendous amount of time with the communities, and it was an ethnographic work. So with ethnographic work, what the idea is that you really want to be immersing yourself within the lifestyles.
I was going
to
say, tell me like I'm 5 in case we don't know what ethnographic is.
Absolutely. So it is a cultural study of these communities, right? So when you really want to understand the cultural aspects of these communities, and whatever it could be, in my case, it was trying to understand the nuances of tigers and the way that they perceive tigers, revere tigers and everything. And so therefore the idea is that you spend a lot of the time with these communities, because you rightly pointed out, initially they can be a bit closed off, and rightfully so. But when they hear the purpose and the intent of your visit to these villages and why you want to interact with them, and ultimately they're very understanding of these things. Yeah.
And that's something that we've talked about in so many different ways right here at Community Matters Cafe, is that we all really do want the same, but it's how do we get there and what obstacles might be in our path. Like no matter what community you go to all over the world, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. They obviously want to protect the nature around them, but not at the risk of their own family, their own livelihood. So the fact that you're able to connect those dots is incredible. And I think what we have to talk about before we dive into your research is the fact that you came to Clemson to do it. So the fact that you came all the way to Clemson, what spoke to you about that university, that program? You literally did a full circle. You went from India to Clemson all the way back to India. So what was it about this evolution for you in your education where you said, this is where I want to do this work?
Absolutely. So I was at the time after my graduation working with Global Tiger Forum. Now, Global Tiger Forum is an intergovernmental organization that monitors all the 13 tiger range countries, and its headquarters are in New Delhi. So that's where I was. And that's where, Clemson University comes in, is because Global Tiger Forum and Clemson University have an MOU where they really want to help, and through this partnership, support PhD candidates that are from the tiger range countries but have interest in doing some research surrounding, the communities and the tigers, and they really help support and fund those PhD programs. And that was the first time I heard about the program at Clemson University called Tigers United. And the initiative works for trying to advance tiger conservation, uplift the local community. So it really spoke to me, and that's what I applied for it, and then I was at Clemson doing my PhD program.
So what was that like going to Clemson when you graduated? Was Clemson your first experience in the U.S.?
It really was.
What was that like for you?
It was so interesting. And of course, the first month was a bit of a cultural shock as well. But I'll tell you 2 things about that experience. One, it is pretty unique to see the tiger presence across the university and the town. Everyone, from the merch that they wear to, tiger is just omnipresent, at Clemson. And so it's interesting that, you don't have wild tigers here, right? But for an institute that kind of has taken on tiger as their mascot, and proudly so it's really interesting how they all rally behind their mascot, which is ultimately the wild tiger. The other thing was that was a year when COVID hit. So, well, it was both
what
good.
What a time to come.
I know. It was both good and bad, because the good was that that got me a lot of time to just sit and do my research. So
no one could not do their homework during COVID because you had nothing else to do.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, I feel like that's just another opportunity to solve conflict that was given to you. So like you said, you came for this incredible opportunity to meet all these people, and then immediately something was shut down. So in your research, have you seen other pathways or other obstacles that have hindered you, or that you've had to supersede when you were trying to pursue this message of resolving conflict and connecting humanity with that tiger element?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things which is so unique about, Tigers United program is that usually to do research like that, it is a tremendous amount of work to get those approvals. Now, tiger and tiger-related data is very sensitive data for the tiger range countries, and so there are a lot of approvals from top down that one really has to take to do any kind of research of that kind, especially when it comes from, a foreign university. And what really worked for me in this case was the program, the Tigers United program, which is housed at Clemson University. So the fact that it had strategically developed all the multi-institution partnerships, so we had key government agencies, NGOs, academic institutes, and that really led to us being provided with all the logistical, I would say intellectual, political, and on-the-ground support and infrastructure that we needed to facilitate our projects and successfully do so. Yeah.
Now, obviously, we've been talking about your work. So I do want to talk about that because, like you said, this program allowed you to go in and do research, and specifically your research really wrapped your arms around bringing technology into these communities, into these tribes to help the tiger community and the human community live in peace.
Yeah.
Now, you used AI in order to do this, and from my understanding, it was an AI camera that was also successfully helped put in jail 32 poachers in Africa, and you're using that technology to help the villages be aware of new tiger presence. So obviously, I'm not the one with the doctorate, you are. So can you walk us through what your research is doing and how it's actually helping solve that conflict that you saw initially?
Absolutely. So, if I could say technology is only one element to how we address that.
You can say whatever you want. This is literally your show.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we really look at it is a very comprehensive way to approach that. So we work with technology. So with that, we have, like you rightly pointed out, we have AI embedded camera systems. And these are when we got these camera systems, they had never been tested on wild tigers before.
Oh, wow.
So we had to develop and train the cameras so that, what the camera really does, because it has that AI embedded in it, is that it is able to autonomously identify your species of interest. So it's going to pick up on just the tiger, as opposed to, we used to have all the other camera traps that would basically store every other picture that it would capture, right? And so it's such a long drawn process to then manually go through each of those and select the pictures you want. And so this autonomously identifies the tiger, and then because it has a communication box which is sort of combined with the camera system, so it connects to your local cell tower, and it will not only capture that, see if it's a tiger or not, and then it will connect to that tower and give the end user an alert in the form of an email with a picture, and all of it in 30 seconds.
Wow.
And so once we were able to field test it, and we did that in the same tiger corridor, and we selected all the high conflict areas, what we really did is we tested out these cameras for two different use cases. One, we put them in these trails so we could monitor the movement of tigers that was leading up to either village settlements and all these, the big, where the people lived. And secondly, in grazing areas too, because as we mentioned, grazing, the livestock is also a big activity there. And so we used it there. It successfully was able to capture the first ever, pictures of wild tiger, all under 30 seconds. And we trained and we provided capacity building workshops to the frontline staff, to the forest department as well. So that was the other component too, so that they could really use, because they're at the end of the day the key people who are going to be using these camera systems and want that data. And once we were able to do that, the rangers that we worked with refer to it as like eyes in the forest, because it's just there. It's capturing things which you could, potentially could not. It's almost like 24/7 surveillance of these tiger habitats. And by detecting, tiger movement, let's say around the villages or grazing areas, they are also able to mobilize their resources swiftly and get to these places before the situation escalates. So it's even revolutionized the way that they respond to conflict now.
So now, for example, if your cameras detect a tiger that's on the move, let's say close to a grazing area, these rangers are able to alert either the farmers or that community and say it's time to move the cattle, it's time to move the goats, so that way they are not losing any member of their herd or their tribe. So what have you seen so far now that you've implemented this technology, you've seen this, how have you seen those opportunities of conflict change?
Yeah, another last element to that also is that we trained community stewards. These are just local individuals from the same communities, and we basically train them so they can do camera surveillance. They work with the forest department. They help us in our community engagement workshops too. And what we really saw is that really helps to foster trust and great communication between the forest department, us researchers, and also the community. And so once the forest department staff captures the images, and if they deem that to be dangerous, then they actually call up the community steward. So that it's then the job of the community steward to then, he goes out in his bicycle and his microphone, and he just sort of notifies everyone that so and so is the area that we need to clear off.
Wow.
Because there is a tiger that's soon going to be approaching that area.
That was going to be my next question, because a lot of these spaces, they might not have that cell tower. They might not be getting that text message or that email in places where, I saw in some of your interviews that don't even have running water necessarily. So they might not be getting that message. So it is manually taken to these villages.
It is manually taken. You're absolutely right. And, when you're actually in these areas, you see this unique combination of the most cutting edge technology, then, immersed with really lack of technology too in these communities, the way we're able to communicate to everyone. So it's very traditional ways of, like disseminating knowledge and information to them. It's just so traditional. So it's a unique combination of those two things together.
So your particular research, like you said, you're dealing with spaces, maybe like New Delhi or something, that have all the technology that you could possibly want, and then going into the field, as it were, and maybe not having any of that. So for you, how has that expanded what you've brought back to Clemson to share with people and maybe help other people understand how places across the world are working and how they are continuing to improve by empowering these communities through what you're doing, whether they might be that big technology base or not? How do you think that's been able to change just the perception of us for those other communities?
No, that's a great question. Because of India's legacy with tiger conservation efforts, what we're working on now is to pioneer a coexistence model. And, that's something you rightly pointed out. Those are the same challenges here. Those are the same challenges across the globe. So that's the beauty of it, is that through these interdisciplinary ways that we're trying to, in these spaces, because we can't only think about tigers, you have to match that with the imperative to safeguard human lives, livelihood, and their well-being. So this model that we have developed is something that we always communicate here, and we try to think about how can we implement that with our challenges here. So for example, if it's white-tailed deer and the damages that brings to the to the agricultural based communities here. And so there is so much knowledge exchange of what those best practices look like. And in fact, moving forward, we also are looking forward to hosting a tiger leadership program. And what that's going to do is bring all the experts and frontline rangers from these tiger range countries, and have all the key folks here from different parks, and and have all our faculty here from interdisciplinary colleges, so we can hold workshops together to exchange those best practices as well.
I think that's incredible, and I love the fact that you compared this model to other opportunities or other conflicts that might arise, because like you said, it's really just all about all of us, whether it be human or nature, learning to live together, because our spaces are continuing to overlap, and we all want to do what's in our best interest, but so do the animals. So when you talk about being able to duplicate this model, what do you think is the thing that empowered communities most and eradicated some of that fear? And how do you think we can continue to replicate that in other areas?
Oh, absolutely. So I think one of the main things we saw that worked out the best for us with the workshops. The more you do direct engagements with the communities, the more in-person confrontations you have, that allows you the opportunity to, as I mentioned earlier, not only to disseminate the information you want to do, but also learn so much from them. What are the things they're looking for in because ultimately they're the ones residing in these landscapes. And so I think our community engagement and our community capacity building workshops have been a key, in terms of what led to the success of that. And then outside of it, of course, there is trying to bring that same model here. But even in India, tiger and that landscape is just one of the many things. I mean, we have growing challenges with elephants in India too. And there are all these different landscapes. So our trail guard cameras, our AI cameras, are now also looking into those landscapes with elephants. And they've been sort of trained to autonomously identify elephants as well. So they've been helping with that elephant-related conflict too.
And I think it's incredible also the fact that this has been a technology piece that's also used to hold people accountable that are actively attacking nature.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to touch on what it's doing to eradicate poachers and how it's helping hold that group of people accountable and how we can basically shine a light on something that's really moved in the dark for a long time.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it, because, when we look at tiger reserves in India, that is a massive amount of stringent, management and very successful management of tigers. But you can't have that outside of the reserves, especially not in these human-dominated, multi-use forested landscapes. And so those are the areas where poachers then therefore get that, that free will to, once they get to know about the tiger movements, then, oftentimes what they'll also do is that tigers, once they hunt the livestock, they will poison, they would poison the carcass in attempts to then ultimately kill the tiger. And that's what happens too. So tigers, in these areas, there are water holes where they come to drink water, and they know where those are, so they would poison those too. So once
they would poison the water?
Yeah. So then when the tiger goes to drink it, obviously it'll be poisoned and
But they could also poison people or any other animals that were drinking the same water, right?
That's absolutely right. So people usually do not have access to those, but you're absolutely right.
Any other animal
wildlife
that
does, and they go through the same fate as the tigers. And so, again, we did with the forest department staff. Those were the workshops where we learned about what those local conflict issues were. We also told them what the cameras were, gave them demonstrations, and they had brilliant ideas about, okay, there could be multiple other use cases for your cameras too. And that's when we learned about these things, and we realized that poaching is, it always has been in the cases, in the case of tigers, but in these places, in these shared spaces, that comes out to be one of the, very prominent challenges as well. And that's when there are a set of cameras that are then trained just to identify humans, because humans are technically not supposed to be in some of those areas. So around a carcass, you can monitor that, and as we do, or these water holes, you can monitor that as well. So these are also all these attempts where you have a very good chance of catching poachers, and they are.
What surprised you most during your research? Like, I'm sure you had, your concepts and your thesis and your goals going into this, because obviously this requires a lot of strategy, a lot of planning, a lot of networking and putting puzzle pieces together on your part. But what really surprised you most that you didn't expect when you walked away from your research?
You always have a sense of understanding. I mean, we do so much. We had a good idea about what that looks like, of sharing space with a large predator. But once you're actually there, I was there in these human communities, and our entire team was there. And in the evenings, in one of the high conflict villages, some of the villagers had told us that just stay here till the evening, because that's the time the tiger starts to become active. And then they were like, you're going to hear it come towards at the back, in the backyards. And we stayed there, and rightfully so. You start hearing a male tiger growling, and it's walking around, and they had kids and all of them. So they have their own way of managing that, which is they'll, sort of put their kids, lock them into the houses for a certain number of hours. But it's also unfortunate because a lot of them go to school, and they go to school, as you can imagine, walking, or at best, a bicycle or so. So if they are ever so late coming back to home, so we had all the mothers telling us that that's a very worrisome time for them too, trying to hope that they come back safe, and don't face any tiger attacks. So you forget about what that complexity and the challenge really looks like, in the real world.
Well, and like you said, hearing from mothers that are,
Yeah.
they want their children to go and to be educated and have this
Yeah.
opportunity to
Yeah.
learn more, but then having this stress and this heaviness on their
Yeah.
heart until they see them back at the house because
That's
it's
right.
Tiger Hour. That's something I never would have wrapped my head around had you not shared that.
And the other thing we do after we actually found out about that, what really also, we started thinking about this is that how important it is for young children going to these schools to have an environmental education program, but one that is localized, so like a place-based education curriculum where they get to learn about, well, why are tigers here, right? Because these young children, they only see tigers, and that's the other thing. They only see tigers causing damages.
Right.
They don't know
So there's
about
an initial fear.
Absolutely. And they don't know about the very many benefits that the tiger's presence has, which a lot of the older, members of the same community do, which is that, a tiger presence, what does that do economically? There are literally economic, they're engines of growth, where tigers are
Can you
found.
talk to us about that?
Oh,
What does-
absolutely.
obviously, because I see it as like, my mom loves tigers, my dad loves tigers, we love tigers,
Yeah.
we heart tigers. But, when you talk about the fact that there's an economic benefit to it and also an environmental impact to it. Like,
Absolutely.
my understanding from one of your interviews
100%.
was if you have tigers, the rest of the ecosystem is healthy. It's a sign of a healthy ecosystem. But
Correct.
I didn't even think about it financially. How does that play in?
No, absolutely. And, before I get to that, you rightly said that, especially today with the kind of unprecedented ecological crisis we face, tigers, we look at them as almost a champion species. And, in terms of how they have, of course, there's a conservation urgency, but also there's so much hope when you save a species like tiger. And any conservation efforts and investment that goes into the species goes far beyond the stripes, that actually ends up benefiting, of course, ecologically, because tiger is an apex predator, right? So you conserve tiger and you're pretty much conserving some of the world's richest ecosystems, which includes territories of thousands of other endangered species, right? But at the same time, in recent years, our understanding of the multitude of values they bring to human communities has increased tremendously. So we mentioned economically. So these landscapes have, socioeconomically pretty poor communities, and they rely so heavily on forest resources for livelihood, for even day-to-day use. So one has to collect fuel wood and things like that, forest products, each day. So it's very important for them in terms of how much they benefit out of it. But at the same time, it generates so much employment opportunities through ecotourism, jobs, in the form of, now, of course, if there's tigers there, there'll be a whole ecotourism angle to it. So you need guides, you need drivers, you need places to run the resorts or just the forest department staff. I mean, all those employment opportunities sort of just arise just because of tiger's presence there, So it gives so many alternative livelihood opportunities to these communities, which otherwise they did not. So there is that as well.
That's incredible. I don't think I knew that, like you said, that ecotourism, I know that is something that is growing because I think we are getting back that connectivity to nature. It's almost as we get more technology, we yearn to touch grass again, so to speak.
That's exactly
and
right.
going back to that, but I wasn't sure if things like ecotourism were actually beneficial. And so in your research and in your findings and living in those environments, have you seen that it is a benefit and that it helps people understand, empathize, and protect more when they go back home?
Absolutely. That's the only thing, is that once you have a lot of damages that the communities are facing due to the presence of tigers, you have to have benefits that they can see. Of course, now the religious and that spiritual angle is there for sure, because tiger habitats also safeguard sacred sites to several ethnic communities that form deep cultural and historical linkages with tigers. So it's very beneficial from a religious standpoint, and maintaining their cultural identity too, right? Since so much of it revolves around the tiger. But at the same time, these communities face, as we mentioned, the economic damages. So what's going to compensate for those damages that they're experiencing? So employment opportunities is a great way where they do see that benefit, of the ways that they can bring more revenue into one household.
That's so special, just because, like I said, I didn't know if things like that are actually good or beneficial, because, I see some things in different countries, like if an animal is just kind of used to take tourist photos and things like that, and I shy away from it because I don't know the well-being of that animal, and I don't know that I want to contribute to that. But it sounds like what's actually happening, at least in India, for this ecotourism is that it's very harmonious, and and it is a great tourist experience, but it's more to see that appreciation versus just that photo op.
Absolutely. And you are directly contributing to local economy as well.
Yeah, which is beautiful and impactful. One thing I wanted to revisit is that you mentioned that religious connectivity aspect. Do you feel like now that you are assuaging a lot of this conflict when you saw these smaller communities and empowering them to live in harmony with the tiger population, did that allow for a reconnection of those religious aspects? Because I know the tiger in many areas is revered. It is a protector. It is an active part of, it's considered a deity. So do you feel like that repaired some of that religious connectivity as well?
That's such a great question. And in terms of the connectivity of it, I think it's mostly, I would say, our educational curriculums that we have implemented in the local schools. So these are place-based in nature. So they're based on broad principles wherein there will be all the experiential learning, aspects of this curriculum. All the lessons, everything that these students learn are all based on local biophysical and sociocultural context. So they'll learn about tigers, they'll learn about their local, ecology. But at the same time, we have so many tribes in these communities, and they have incredible art that speaks about the conservation ethos of these communities, about the relevance of tigers. But the younger communities, and this is, a common theme across the globe, they are slowly, they don't have the same information that the older people in the communities do. So with the implementation of some of our curriculums that are running in these schools, I think that's what we're really seeing is what helps build that religious connectivity back with the communities.
Yeah. So really empowering, like you said, the youth, the younger generations, the people who are going to also be shepherding this conservation into the next generation. Now, you as a young student coming in, do you feel like you got to make a lot of that direct impact and have those conversations with people who might be a student just like you in a few years?
Oh, absolutely. And it's all demographic, experiences that I get as well. So when we visit academic institutes, for example, so like you rightfully said, there are all these young girls, it's still, back in the day, and still so, there are not many women in conservation. So now women are starting to, come into this field as well, and they're doing tremendously well. And so I think it's just really great to have those conversations with them. And they also saw that opportunity that I took, which is coming to Clemson University, getting my PhD degree, and now working in Tigers United. And so they see that path, and a lot of them perhaps want to pursue a PhD degree, do research here. So there is that aspect to it. And the other, which I get so much joy in it, which is in the local communities when we do our, community engagement workshops or things like that. All the young, rural girls, we talk to them so much as well, and or local teachers, and they have big dreams, and they really want to do great for their community and for tigers and everything. So that to us is very powerful whenever we get to do that.
Yeah. So looking at everything you've done, like you said, those conversations that you have, when you made that leap and you made that decision to come to Clemson, what was that feeling like when you're on that plane and you are coming over and you remember being in this community and going and seeing tigers and elephants and all of this with your family, but you're taking yourself out of that to go to a place you've never seen before, never been, where you don't really know anybody except for the people you've met via email. So that's what we talk about, brewing that big, bold, beautiful life. And that was your really big, bold, beautiful decision. But what catapulted you into just making it?
I mean, really hearing about the program and, what it really stands for, it's not just tiger conservation as we talk about. It's a great sort of thing that sort of, I think, unites. And tigers have a unique way to, unify people all under.
They really do.
They really do.
I mean, just look at your home community in Clemson, South Carolina.
That's
Yes.
absolutely
Yes.
right. And in fact, in our program, that's something that we really resonate with that idea a lot, because we think about, you see, beyond their natural habitats to tigers, they're such powerful cultural ambassadors, right? I mean, they have a global resonance clearly that transcends geography and time. So as a university, having that mascot, and I see the way that, they look at themselves as as Clemson as a community, but we're taking all the attributes from the wild tiger, right? So it's really beautiful. And so tiger is really a living cultural, ambassador of sorts. And it provides these intangible, yet I think very powerful services, whether it's in terms of a social cohesion, cultural continuity, and also a collective identity to the Institute. And those were, attributes that I really appreciated about Clemson University too. So it was a very easy decision, I think, to move here. It was like from one passionate country landscape to another in a different way.
It's so funny. In so many of these conversations that we've had, I think I'm always ready for somebody to talk about, I don't know, I had to make a pro-con list and this, that, and the other, but some of the biggest, boldest decisions have really seemed to come with so much ease, whether it was an entrepreneur saying like, no, I was walking away from my 9-to-5 cushy job to go and open up this vintage boutique that now has its second location, or no, I knew I was going to be a great actor, so I just had to go and start auditioning. So, and for you, just going and being part of this program was an easy decision.
Absolutely. It's like you get a calling, and I think, my father has, his this thing that he always talks about is that every good thing in his life has really come from tigers, or it's revolved around tigers. So he's so passionate about them. He, contributed his entire work life, working towards tiger conservation in India. And that's just such a great impact that he had, that I think for me too, naturally, especially with my childhood there, and also, consciously, subconsciously observing him and, seeing the efforts that he's put in to this beautiful species and what it really does when, you really do those efforts, and you see those results in front of you. I mean, so I think when I got that opportunity, I think it was an easy yes.
That's so special. And obviously, hi, Dad. We love you. Daddies are sure great. We're big fans around here. What do you think the biggest thing is that you learned from your dad, that you took with you into your own research, into your own way of running with the tigers?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things, and this, I think has maybe perhaps little to do with tiger directly, but it's actually his way of being a great manager. He has been such a tremendous manager, and that's something we witnessed all our lives. And you really get to see that it's really your ability to work with people around, to collaborate, and of all different stratas of society too, all, whether it's government or local community folks or your own, forest department staff that you're working with, to have that ease of working with everyone and bringing on, everyone on board with your idea and goal. I think that's a fantastic ability he has to do that.
I love hearing about that connectivity that you both have and seeing what he's brought into your research. And like you said, getting to share some of that with him in this shared love. Now, obviously, this is everything that you have done up until this point. I think we're all wondering, what are you doing now? What is next? What are you excited about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we're so excited about is to shape up Tigers United at Clemson University. We've really, I think, taken some steps where we are creating that into a very collaborative, interdisciplinary engine for both conservation efforts, but also student leadership. I think student leadership is very important to us. So we have, in order to be able to tackle the complexity of environmental challenges, and we have touched upon that before, a program like this where it sort of unites continents, right, and diverse institutes. I mean, it just creates such a vital opportunity to learn from each other. The way we look at it is that it's convergence of global expertise, experience, and knowledge. And I think only if we do that, we would be better equipped, to think creatively, to think innovative solutions. And so that's the platform that, this sort of program provides us with. And what we've done, and we're very excited about, is working with different colleges within the university. We have something with College of Business, where we're thinking about how can we create a business plan that provides alternative livelihood opportunities for artists, the tribal artists in these landscapes. So how can we empower them economically while safeguarding their cultural heritage, things like that. And then with College of Engineering, for example, we're now in-house at Clemson trying to get bioengineering, technological solutions and develop those not just for Tiger Range countries, but for all the challenges here statewide as well. So there's going to be that. And then we have veterinary sciences as well, where with them we are pioneering IVF and other reproductive technologies for big cat recovery. So there's lots going on, but what we're really passionate about, that something that unites all of this, is how much that helps with student leadership. These are young students, passionate in different fields, but passionate about conservation. And so we're really excited about providing them with opportunities, more study abroad, more global, challenge courses, and just an experiential global exposure where they can just think critically, be global citizens, and hopefully in the future be great advocates of these initiatives.
For me, so much of that eradicating conflict in general is just educating yourself on how the rest of the world functions, how it eats, how it sleeps, what the music sounds like, what the food tastes like, what the people are like. Because much like you said, these younger generations who might only see a tiger as a predatory animal, as something that causes conflict and harm, and there's fear, but it's because they don't have all the information. And I think that just really resonates with the picture of humanity. A lot of times we feel so much threat by a group of people or by a cause or by a force that we don't necessarily understand the full picture of. So when you talk about taking this model and copy and pasting it onto other conflicts that we have, I really see so much beautiful opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, you said it. That's absolutely correct. And we're very excited, to take our faculty, students, and oftentimes supporters of the program to India. That's something we do as well. And, give them that exposure to see these tigers in the wild, to see the communities, to see our efforts, so they get that exposure. But also, I think, seeing those things really in reality, it just is so much more impactful as well.
No, I agree. Believe me, we will be doing Coffee and Conversations live, okay, if that is an opportunity. So we will definitely be part of that.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned supporters, because I think the reality of it is the fact that all of this can't happen without support. And we know that universities rely on a lot of support, especially from alumni and things like that. But specifically for these types of programs, what support would you be looking for? How can people help and contribute and know if they are giving $1, if they are giving money, that it is going towards something that is truly poignant and life-changing for multiple reasons?
Oh, absolutely. So we have very many different ways of that. Starting now, we are also creating memberships for supporters that really want to have a lasting engagement with the program as well. And so there are different tiers to that. So ultimately, every dollar, even a single dollar you give, are going to be distributed across our initiatives. So we have several different initiatives, as we talked about it today, whether it's community engagement, whether it's development of our educational programs, and to even run those. And then we have training and capacity building workshops we do with the frontline staff, and then hosting workshops here. So there are all of these things going on in parallel that ultimately will, in one or the other way, help advance the tiger conservation and upliftment of communities. So there's different ways that donors can absolutely, since we rely so much on getting that support to be able to run these initiatives. So there is that membership tiers that they can absolutely join us. And then we also have another program coming up, which is a philanthropic model, where the idea is that you definitely get to experience and do what we are calling the tiger journey. So you get to go to India, you get to really gain an immersive experience not just the tiger aspect of it, but also the cultural landscape, like truly get an experience of India and some of these really sort of the vibrant culture and get to experience that as well. And so and the idea is that you go to these tiger journeys and hopefully support our program in return as well. And so at the end of the day, so we can run all these initiatives successfully.
The fact that you do have so many different initiatives, and like you said, just combining the different colleges, I wanted to circle back to that because I don't think as a young student I would have thought that my interest in culture and community and human connectivity could ever get me into a more science and technology based opportunity like you had. And the fact that you were so beautifully blending these two, where you're using science, math, and technology, again, with that very humanized element and anthropological view of that is so unique and special. So if you're talking to a student, like I said, the thing I remember maybe about biology was like mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? Like that's what I remember that. But combining everyone and really empowering students to say, if you have a passion for this species or you have a passion for conservation, you can really attain that no matter what your specific degree is.
Absolutely. And I'll even go and make a connection that might not intuitively come to people, but there is so much that we have in works with Clemson athletics, Clemson football.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely.
Lay that out for us.
Yes, absolutely. Because, as you can imagine, thousands and thousands of people rally, behind the tiger mascot.
TIGRS.
Absolutely. And although the challenge, what we're looking into is that it is only a symbolic connection, right? And that goes for, we have, I think, in the United States, over 50 tiger mascot universities. But when you really dig deep into how much of it is really translating from just that symbolism to actual conservation implications of those things, and it's very limited. And so I think we don't want to take our platform for granted, and we know the kind of support that people give towards just tiger being the mascot of this university. And it gains, it's such an incredible platform to spotlight the tiger conservation or the plight of tigers, which is not that great in the wild. So to bring that up, and give it that national spotlight through football is an initiative we're working towards as well. And we have at Clemson, with Clemson Athletics, Paw Journey, which is, an initiative where it's all about developing the scholar athletes as well. And part of the effort that we're also wanting to do is perhaps even have some of the athletes go to India, visit their wild counterparts.
Amazing.
Right? So they visit their wild counterparts. I mean, these are all the attributes they boast that they have, being a tiger, a Clemson tiger, right?
And you're like, let's see it.
I know. Probably not. But it definitely is a great opportunity for them to really, again, understand, the plight of the tigers, the communities that live around it. And then it gives us a great tool. Athletics gives us a great tool, and it's a great vehicle for conservation, I think, conversation as well.
Of course.
Right? And so that's the other thing, is we're creating a conservation marketing around Clemson football too. So that's something we're very excited. So, coming back to your point, so there's something for athletic folks too.
Hrishita, I think you were the most professional dot connector I've ever spoken to. But the fact that you have this huge vision for how everyone can be empowered to not only connect with somebody that might be a world away, might be continents away, but that is actually in their hometown. So the fact that you are connecting athletes and saying, hey, this is something that you represent, but it goes far beyond the jersey or the number that you're wearing.
100%.
This is an embodiment of what Clemson University is.
What we always say is that if the tigers were to disappear in the wild, of course it's a loss of biodiversity, and it signifies the loss of very many benefits it brings to human communities. But at the same time, we really don't want to be an institute that, rallies behind a species that has gone extinct. It's almost our moral duty to be able to really doing something about protecting the wild counterpart of the mascot as well. So we acknowledge that, and hopefully are working towards making sure that that the tiger roars both on the field and off the field as well in the wild.
Exactly. That was my thought, is you're not just protecting the field in Death Valley. You're not just protecting the floor in Jervey Gym. You're going beyond to really protect what the tiger embodies in each and every student and their alumni and anybody who's ever worn that tiger paw or ever gotten that $2 bill with a tiger paw on it. Everybody knows what I'm talking about up there. So as we wrap this conversation, is there anything that you just want to share with people that, I just want to give you the floor, because I feel like you've touched so many different pieces of conflict resolution, of empathy and human nature, and how that can live with Mother Nature in what you're doing, and all while articulating it so beautifully so that we can understand and we can be part of that conversation. But what would you want people to walk away with as that tiger's just walking away into the distance peacefully and away from the livestock, because everything is safe now? But what would you want people to walk away with?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that, often we really like to tell everyone is that conservation of tigers, and I briefly touched upon it, is so much more than just a species. And in fact, if there is one way to put it, is that they are increasingly being acknowledged as indicators of biodiversity and human societal well-being. So a tiger being, thriving and living in these landscapes is great news for biodiversity and the human societies, because of all the benefits they bring to us. And I think one of the other things we do as conservationists is that's the other thing I like to tell everyone, is that our work is not just about safeguarding the tiger. It is so much more also, therefore, because it's also safeguarding the cultural aspects of it, and with Clemson University, the way we look at it is also trying our best to safeguard Clemson's heritage. And, it's the same goes for the very many 50 tiger mascot universities. I mean, imagine there's so much areas of growth and working together all collectively for the initiative, where we make sure that it's not just a symbolic, connection that we have, but we also really care about the species behind the mascot.
And if you were looking at somebody and their thought was maybe, well, somebody's going to save the tiger, someone's going to save the elements, someone's going to fix global warming, someone's going to recycle.
Yeah.
How do we turn that someone else into I am that someone?
I mean, there are great ways to, we're very collaborative in nature. So there are so many different and unique ways in which we can just together. And it's, not only academic, but like I said, there is that tourism angle to it. So whatever floats your boat, I think we have a solution of finding ways to come together on this initiative and be lifelong partners in this mission.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your mission with us today, being part of this conversation, a part of this opportunity to grow together. And I can certainly say you have brewed an incredibly big, bold, beautiful life. And I know that cup is only going to be getting fuller. Now, before I let you go, I do have to ask you, we always ask somebody before they leave Coffee and Conversations, what is it that fills your cup every day?
Just a lot of passion that I have for tigers. Just a lot of passion. I mean, it's just something that it's hard for me to sometimes believe that I got this incredible opportunity in my childhood to have, those memories and that experience. But to be able to share that each day with someone different, and tell that story and have that opportunity to bond together over just such a magnificent, beautiful creature is something that, I think the passion for it keeps me going every day.
I'm so glad that you shared that with us. It is funny. You grew up with tigers, so did I. But again, mine was in Clemson, South Carolina in a mascot costume, so slightly different than yours. But I'm really glad that all of our tigers got to come together today.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Like Hrishita, make sure that you follow along with her journey so that you can be part of that conservation, that conversation, and global solutions that we are all in charge of and responsible for. Thank you all for joining us for another day here at Community Matters Cafe for Coffee and Conversations. We'll see you next time. To everybody out there, thank you so much for joining me for Coffee and Conversations. Now, if you want more stories of motivation, inspiration, and empowerment that can fill up your cup when it's empty, no matter where you are, I invite you to subscribe to our channel for more.